Buenos dias, buenas tardes, buenas noches, amigo, amiga. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We are not so sure what exactly time you are watching this video clip right now, but we are hoping that you are all safe and in good conditions. To our instructor, Ms. Glea Linagayam, thank you for giving us this task to report in this course the Greek mythology and folklore entitled The Fall of Troy, Return of the Greeks, which is the continuation of the Trojan War. But before that, let me introduce to you myself. My name is Maricris Dasco Marzon, your reporter, and today, Miss Margie Militante will now join me to discuss to you today what was the Fall of Troy, Return of the Greeks all about. Ready? Let's start! The Fall of Troy, Return of the Greeks is one of the first epics on the history of movies. It tells the story of the fall of Troy. Paris seduces Helen, queen of Sparta, and takes her to Troy, city-states of his father, King Priam. The Greek declares war against the Trojans, and after 10 years of siege, finally became to invade the city with a wooden horse.
And now for our movie overview. So the main idea and the theme of Fall of Troy, based on the Homer's Iliad and other Greek writers, tells about timeless themes of love, betrayal, and revenge through the romance of Paris and Helen of Troy. So now let's move on to the characters in the movie of Fall of Troy, Return of the Greeks. So Achilles. Achilles is a Greece's greatest warrior and leader of the Myrmidons. Hector. Hector is a prince or crown prince of Troy, commander of the Trojan armies and Paris' older brother. And Paris. Paris is a prince of Troy and Hector's younger brother. Helen. Helen is a former queen of Sparta who became a princess of Troy. Agamemnon. Agamemnon is a king of the United Greek city-states. Odysseus, king of Ithaca. Menelaus. Menelaus is a king of Sparta and younger brother of Agamemnon. And then Briseis is a princess of Troy, priestess of the Trojan temple of Apollo, and Hector and Paris' cousin. And Andromache is a Hector's wife and crown princess of Troy. Then Thetis is Achilles' mother. And then Priam is a king of Troy. He is a father of Hector's and Paris. Then Patroclus is Achilles' younger cousin. And then Nestor. Nestor is Agamemnon's advisor. Then Archiptolemus is the Trojan high priest. Glaucus is second in command of the Trojan armies. Tripus. Tripus is a king of Thessaly. And then Eudorus is Achilles' right-hand man of the Myrmidons. Then Belior, Ajax, and Boagres. So those are the characters in the movie of Fall of Troy, Return of the Greeks. So now let's move on to the summary of movie.
For our movie summary, in legend, Troy is a city that was besieged for 10 years and eventually conquered by a Greek army led by King Agamemnon. The reason for this Trojan War was, according to Homer's Iliad, the abduction of Helen, a queen from Sparta. This abduction was done by Paris, the son of Troy's king Priam. The story of the Iliad ends with the death of Hector, and it is from the Odyssey and later poems that we learn the fate of the other heroes. After the death of Hector, Troy did not immediately fall, but receiving aid from new allies, still continued its resistance. One of these allies was Memnon and Eutypian prince. Penthesilea, the queen of the Amazon, who came with a band of female warriors. All the authorities attest their valor and the fearful effects of their war cry. Penthesilea slew many of the bravest warriors, but was at last slain by Achilles. But when the hero bent over his fallen foe and contemplated her beauty, youth, and valor, he bitterly regretted his victory. Their sides, an insolent bowler and demagogue, ridiculed his grief, and was in consequence slain by the hero. Achilles by the chance has seen Polyxena, daughter of King Priam, perhaps on occasions of the truce which was allowed the Trojans for the burial of Hector. He was captivated with her charms and to win her in marriage, agreed to use his influence with the Greeks to grant peace to Troy. While in the temple of Apollo, negotiating the marriage, Paris discharged at him a poisoned arrow, which, guided by Apollo, wounded Achilles in the heel, the only vulnerable part about him. For Titus, his mother had dipped him when an infant in the river Styx, which made every part of him invulnerable except the heel by which she held him. The body of Achilles, so treacherously slain, was rescued by Aeneas and Ulysses. Thetis directed the Greek to bestow her son's armor on the hero, who of all the survivors should be judged most deserving of it. Aeneas and Ulysses were the only claimants. A select number of the other chiefs were appointed to award the prize. It was awarded to Ulysses, thus placing wisdom before valor, whereupon Aeneas slew himself. On the spot where his blood sunk into the earth, a flower sprang up, called hyacinth, bearing on its leaves the first two letters of the name of Ajax, I, the Greek for woo. Thus Ajax is a claimant with the boy Jacinthus for the honor of giving birth to this flower. There is a species of larkspur which represents hyacinths on the poets in preserving the memory of these events. Delphinium axax larkspur. It was now discovered that Troy could not be taken but by the aid of the arrow of Hercules. They were in possessions of Philoctetes, the friend who had been with Hercules at the last and enlightened his funeral pyre. Philoctetes had joined the Grecian expeditions against Troy, but had accidentally wounded his foot with one of the poisoned arrows, and the smells from his wound proved so offensive that his companions carried him to the Isle of Lemnos and left him there. Jumbe was now sent to induce him to rejoin the army, and he succeeded. Philoctetes was cured of his wound by Machaon, and Paris was the first victim of the fatal arrows. In his distress, Paris bethought him of one whom in his prosperity he has forgotten. This was the nymph Oenone, whom he had married when a youth and had abandoned for the fatal beauty of Helen. Oenone, remembering the wrong she had suffered, refused to heal the wound, and Paris went back to Troy and died. Oenone quickly repented and hastened after him with remedies, but came too late, and in her grief hung herself. There was in Troy a celebration statue of Minerva called the Palladium. It was said to have fallen from heaven, and the belief was that the city could not be taken so long as this statue remained within it. Ulysses, entombed, entered the city in disguise and succeeded in obtaining the Palladium, which they carried off to the Grecian camp. But Troy still held out, and the Greeks began to despair of ever subduing it by force, and by advice of Ulysses resolved to resort to stratagem. They pretended to be making preparations to abandon the siege, and a portion of the ships were withdrawn and lay hid behind a neighboring island. The Greeks were constructed an immense wooden horse, which they gave out was intended as a propitiatory offering to Minerva, but in fact was filled with armed men. The remaining Greeks then betook themselves to their ships and sailed away as it for a final departure.
The Trojans, seeing the encampment broken up and the fleet gone, concluded the enemy to have abandoned the siege. The gates were thrown open, and the whole population issued forth, rejoicing at the long prohibited liberty of passing freely over the scene of the late encampment. The great horse was the chief object of curiosity. All wondered what it could be for. Some recommended to take it into the city as a trophy, but others felt afraid of it. While they hesitate, Glaucon, the priest of Neptune, exclaims, "What madness, citizens, is this? Have you not learned enough of Grecian fraud to be on your guard against it? For my part, I fear the Greeks even when they offer gifts." So saying, he threw his lance at the horse's side. It struck, and a hollow sound reverberated like a groan. Then perhaps the people might have taken his advice and destroyed the fatal horse and all its contents. But just at that moment, a group of people appeared, dragging forward one who seemed a prisoner and a Greek. Stupefied with terror, he was brought before the chiefs, who reassured him, promising that his life should be spared on condition of his returning true answers to the questions asked him. He informed them that he was a Greek, Sinon by name, and that in consequence of the malice of Ulysses, he had been left behind by his countrymen at their departure. With regard to the wooden horse, he told them that it was a propitiatory offering to Minerva, and made so huge for the express purpose of preventing its being carried within the city. Poor Calchas, the prophet, had told them that if the Trojans took possession of it, they would assuredly triumph over the Greeks. So this language turned the tide of the people's feelings, and they began to think how they might best secure the monstrous horse and the favorable auguries connected with it. When suddenly a prodigy occurred which left no room to doubt. There appeared, advancing over the sea, two immense serpents. They came upon the land, and the crowd fled in all directions. The serpents advanced directly to the spot where Glaucon stood with his two sons. They first attacked the children, winding round their bodies and breathing their pestilential breath in their faces. The father, attempting to rescue them, is next seized and involved in the serpent's coils. He struggles to tear them away, but they overpower all his efforts and struggle him and the children in their poisonous folds. This event was regarded as a clear indication of the displeasure of the gods and Glaucon's irreverent treatment of the wooden horse, which they no longer hesitated to regard as a sacred object, and prepared to introduce with due solemnity and into the city. This was done with songs and triumphal acclamations, and the day closed with festivity. In the night, the armed men who were clothed in the body of the horse, being let out by the traitor Sinon, opened the gates of the city to their friends who had returned under cover of the night. The city was set on fire. The people, overcome with feasting and sleep, put to the sword, and Troy completely subdued. So, after hearing so much about the city of Troy and its heroes, so the reader will perhaps be surprised to learn that the exact site of that famous city is still a matter of dispute. There are some vestige of tombs on the plain which must nearly answers to the description given by Homer and the ancient geographers, but no other evidence of the former existence of a great city. And here are the citations that we use in our topic to gather information. That would be all. Thank you everyone and God bless.